Good evening, everyone. If you open your Bibles and stand, you open your Bibles to Ephesians 4, we're reading 15 and 16. Ephesians 4, 15 and 16. But speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things unto him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by whatever joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does his share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. Amen.
The first song will be 301. 301. And I believe we have to use our books tonight. I will sing the wondrous story of Christ who died for me. How he left his home in glory for the cross of Calvary. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea, I was lost, but Jesus found me, found the sheep that went astray. Through his loving arms around me, drew me back into his way. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea, He will keep me till the river rolls its waters at my feet. Then He'll bear me safely over where the loved ones I shall meet. Yes, I'll sing the wondrous story of the Christ who died for me. Sing it with the saints in glory, gathered by the crystal sea. The song 674.
Good to see everybody out tonight. And this is one of those most wonderful times of the year. I mean, just gorgeous outside this time of year after the hot summer. But also, it's baseball playoff time. You got about 4 series going on right now in the playoffs in this round. And when I looked yesterday, each one of them was tied at 1-1. So a lot of good ball being played. There was a feature on the Sunday morning network news show. Comes on at 9 o'clock, and they have the trumpets. And when they play, I know I've got 30 minutes to get out of the house and get here. but I usually see a little bit of it. And there was a feature, it's been a few months ago. It was called Edging into the Spotlight, when playing in the background is fame enough. And it featured a few different people. One was a guy by the name of Mark Rivera, who played in Billy Joel's band when he did concerts. And the guy was a backup, but he had his time when he would shine, when he had his solo. There's also a story in that about a Broadway understudy, and I don't remember her name. But again, somebody who is in the background, somebody who's ready if the number one performer wasn't able to make it that night. But the one that caught my attention was about a man by the name of Eric Krantz. And I mentioned baseball, and he is a retired baseball player. He was a catcher. Nobody's saying, yeah, I recognize that name. No, he's not one that you would think of as you think about a catcher. In my lifetime, as far as following the game, Johnny Bench, he's the man. He's a Hall of Fame catcher. He could hit, he could throw out runners. He was a great defensive catcher. We think about Yogi Berra, a little bit before my time. And we think about Yogi as being a philosopher, and he had a lot of great statements. But you know, he was a really, really good catcher if you go back and look at it. He was one of the main cogs in the New York Yankees when they won so many World Series. So you think about catchers, think about some of those guys. You don't think about Eric Krantz. But what caught my attention, Eric Krantz, he played in 11 different seasons on the Major League level. And not that many people make it to the major leagues. And he made it in 11 seasons. And during that time, he played on 14 different teams. That's a lot of turnover. That's a lot of uncertainty. Eric Krantz, he was good, but he wasn't great. He never was the main catcher on any team that he played for. But he was a man who realized that, you know, it was okay not to be the superstar. Every team needs more than one catcher. That's the most demanding position in the field. You know, you're taking the pitches, you're squatting down, you're getting hit by foul balls. Sometimes a batter will hit you with a bat. And it's just a lot of wear and tear. He never was a starting catcher, but he was a backup. He realized his role, and he made a good career. He didn't become wealthy. He didn't have one of these multi-million-dollar contracts that we find over the wintertime. You hear a lot of people getting. He was a backup, didn't make all that much money, but he survived for 11 different seasons. Here's a man who realized his talent would only take him so far, but he made himself valuable to whatever team he was on. And as I mentioned, 14 different teams. You know, he was, I think, originally drafted by Toronto, but by the time he made the major leagues, he was with the Pirates organization. Then he played for about 3 different years in Philadelphia. Then later on, dropped by them, picked up by Toronto. Then he played for Kansas City for a couple of years. He went back to Philadelphia. He was with Houston, back to Pittsburgh. In 2017, he was with the Yankees, and then in 18, Milwaukee, 19, the Giants, and Tampa Bay. And then he ended his career again with the Yankees. So he was with several teams more than once. Again, they realized here was a valuable asset to the team. It's a team. And he made himself available to help in any way he could. He was a backup. He worked at his craft. He learned from others. And he was there, and he was available. He gave his best for the team. Here was one he realized, again, his talent would only take him so far. He was not the guy that the kids growing up would want to be like as we think about a kid playing in the backyard, thinking about hitting that home run to win the World Series. No, they don't dream about being the backup catcher who maybe only plays once every 3 or 4 days. But again, here's a position that's necessary. Now, you don't need a team full of power-hitting first basemen who maybe don't hit for average, but you got to have variety. You have to have different ones. As John read to us earlier, Paul, writing to the Ephesians, talks about the body in verse 16 of chapter 4, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Talks about each part of the body is necessary for the body to function properly. Now, Paul put it this way in writing to the Corinthians in chapter 12. In verse 14 beginning, for the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members of the body, each one of them, as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that we seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greater honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it, that there be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. If one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. Parts of the human body we think may be less honorable than others. Think backup catcher, but yet necessary for the team. And as we think about the Lord's body, and we all have different roles to play. Not everyone is the one who gets up and leads singing on Sunday morning or presents a lesson on Sunday mornings, or the one who is very good at delivering the Bible studies. But yet every member, with whatever role that we do behind the scenes, each member is necessary for the betterment of the body. So even a backup catcher who played in 11 seasons, his batting average was .209, not very good, but yet needful for the teams, and various teams recognized Eric Krantz's value to the betterment of the team as a whole. And as we think about our roles as God's people in the local church here, everybody is essential for the building up of this body and for the full functioning. That's it for tonight. I appreciate your attention to the things that are said. We'll be singing a song as a means of invitation. If you need to come, that opportunity is available. Come to put on Christ as his child in baptism, or to repent of sins and confess. We can pray for you, or if you just need the prayers of the saints, feel free to let that be known as we stand and as we sing.
There's a great day coming.
A great day coming, there's a great day coming by and by, when the saints and the sinners shall be parted right and left. Are you ready for that day to come? Are you ready? Are you ready? Are
Yeah, well, good. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I will be starting in Matthew chapter 14, if you want to get ready for that. Matthew chapter 14. I'm just going to have a little brief introduction, and then I want to dive right into, I have a video that I want to show us. It's going to be about 7-8 minutes long, and then we have a few things we want to get in. Yes, what? Are you already talking? I'd hate to hear what you say about my sermons. I don't want to know. Don't tell me. Keep that to yourself. So, to me, one of the greatest things about how we're getting to spend the time in Matthew is that we're really getting to dive in, and I believe really take the time that's necessary, and I think that is good for us to dive into all of these things. The only negative, this is the only negative that I can see in spending this much time, and it's that I think over the course of time, we can kind of see it as this class, this study, and when you spread something out, you can kind of not see the whole picture. You just kind of see each class going along. And so since we're almost at about a halfway point of our time in Matthew, I want to just share just a short video, and all it's going to do is just remind us of the themes and the concepts that we've already studied from Matthew chapter 1 to Matthew chapter 13. And then we'll pick right back up and go into 14. I'll have just a few quick words about what was presented in the last two classes that'll help me set up for our study tonight. So if we could go ahead, I'll tell you what, you can just bring it up if you're able, and we'll just, yeah. And we'll just watch that together, and then I'll continue.
The Gospel according to Matthew. It's one of the earliest official accounts about Jesus of Nazareth, his life, his death, and his resurrection. The book itself is anonymous, but the earliest reliable tradition links it to Matthew the tax collector, who was one of the 12 apostles that Jesus appointed, and he actually appears within the book itself. For about 30 to 40 years, the apostles orally taught and passed on their eyewitness accounts about Jesus, along with his teachings that they had all memorized. And Matthew has then collected and arranged all these into this amazing tapestry and designed the book to highlight certain themes about Jesus. In this video, we're just going to cover the first half of the book. Specifically, Matthew wants to show how Jesus is the continuation and fulfillment of the whole biblical story about God and Israel. That Jesus is the Messiah from the line of David, that he is a new authoritative teacher like Moses, and not only that, Jesus is God with us, or in Hebrew, Emmanuel. And Matthew's designed this book with an introduction and then a conclusion, and these act like a frame around 5 clear sections right here in the center, each of which concludes with a long block of Jesus' teaching. Now, this design is very intentional, and it's amazing. Just watch how this works. Chapters 1 through 3, they set the stage by attaching Jesus' story right onto the storyline of the Old Testament scriptures. So Matthew opens with a genealogy about Jesus that highlights how
All right, so I wanted to do that to kind of give us this overview of where we've been so we know where we're going. Jesus has introduced himself from the line of David, the one to fulfill all things, and he's coming with a new message like Moses, right? Moses is up on the top of the mountain. Jesus is what we call a mountain. It's really a large hill, kind of like Rolling Hills in Middle Tennessee, right there by the Sea of Galilee. He goes up on this mountain and gives the new law, the new way of life, except it's different. This law is a little bit different than the laws of Moses. The laws of Moses are more about the actions and God trying to train his people to also therefore change their hearts. This one, Jesus comes in and says, I'm more interested. You have heard it said, now I say. I want you to be transformed by this. I don't want you to just look at it like laws or just sacrifices. I want you to be different internally. I want you to put God above all. He doesn't come second. He doesn't come third. And I want you to love your neighbor as yourself. I've mentioned this before, the last couple of classes that we've had. This is where we get into the Gospel of Matthew, and it gets really real. At the beginning of it, it was a little bit more good and nice, niceties. We get to hear Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. We get to see him heal people. It sounds really great. And now, as the video just showed, he's going from, I've set up these things, now it's time to put them into action. And so now it's time to, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. And that was the last two classes that Derek and Brent were able to give to us in 13 in those parables. And what it says in the parables, I'm just giving an overall theme after you've heard those two classes, is the overall theme of chapter 13 in all of those parables is that Jesus never promises that if you pick up your cross and follow him, that life is perfect, that there's no evil in the world, that your life is going to be perfect. Instead, what he clearly says is that if you will come into the kingdom, you will have blessings, but inside of it, there's also evil. We had the example of the sower, right? And some people accepted it, but then they fell away because there's evil in the world, and they accepted the evil. You had the parable about the leaven. In that case, the leaven was good going into the world of evil. You had the mustard seed and talk about the birds in the middle of the tree or the kingdom. You also had at the very end the parable of the great pearl, the dragnet, the hidden treasure. And it was all saying, in this imperfect world, sell everything you have, go after that which is important, and cling to that, because in this world you'll have a lot of trouble. As the video reminded us, the next chapter is not a new story. It is now that you've heard the Sermon on the Mount, you've seen that he has the authority. Now he tells you parables that line all of that up. And in chapter 14, as we get into tonight, there's more of this teaching, this more of seeing his character and what is expected out of those that follow him. If you're there with me in Matthew chapter 14, I'd like to ask somebody to go ahead and read those first 5 verses. Matthew chapter 14, 1 through 5, please. Right. So I just want to kind of introduce this before closing out that story in verses 6 through 14 there. So there's a lot of, you hear Herod a lot, and I don't want to take the time, for the sake of time, I don't want to go into all of the history tonight, but who this is. I'll show a quick map. I believe I have a map here. Let me see if I still have that. I do. Y'all see that little, so it says there in your Bibles, Herod the Tetrarch, or the division of 4. It's how division of the land was after Herod the Great. This is one of Herod the Tetrarch, or Herod Antipas, is one of the sons of Herod the Great. Herod the Great is the one that did all the amazing building projects, And he's also the one we read about when you have a leader, Herod, trying to kill the babies, trying to make sure that he gets rid of the one that the star and all of that is about. So here we have in the northern region, Herod Antipas is over this Galilean region, and also here to the eastern side of the Jordan River, north of the Dead Sea. So that's his area. All of this that we're talking about here in verses 1 through 14 is in an area that's been looked at, and people have dug and done their dig sites there. And this is what it looks like today. They think this is where this all happened. Here's a graph that just kind of helps you to visualize what we're looking at on the side of a hill. So we're having this kingdom here, or this palace where he's at, overlooking this Dead Sea area. So that's just a visualization as we go into it. I want to look at a few things within here. Now, there was some things here where he said, this is John the Baptist. He has risen from the dead. And that is why miraculous powers are at work in him. So something a little strange about Matthew 14. I want to remind you again, Matthew does not teach in chronological order, okay? Do y'all remember the last time we heard about John the Baptizer? Do you remember the last story that we read about in Matthew, what he was doing? Anybody remember that? It was a few classes ago. All right, he was baptizing, and then after that, he's baptizing Jesus, and then in the little video there, it kind of put, some people see Jesus as positive, some are neutral, and some are negative. Now, that might sound strange to you to say, why are you putting John the Baptizer as neutral, kind of in the middle? It's because of the story. Remember, last time we saw John, where was he at? He was in prison. He was in prison, and what did he send his followers out to do? Are you the one? Are you sure you're the one? So that's why it describes him as neutral. And it's not that he doesn't know who he is. He was the one that baptized him. He's the one that saw the dove. He's the one that heard the Father from heaven. But it's all a part of this process of what we've talked about in our classes before, that Jesus wasn't being the Messiah that John the Baptizer expected. And so he's struggling with that, right? So the last time we've heard about him in Matthew, he was in prison. Well, now it's kind of, the author here, Matthew, is catching us up to something that's already happened and letting you know John the Baptizer has already been killed by Herod Antipas. And so at the beginning there, in verse 1, it said, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch heard about the news of who? Jesus. Okay, he's hearing about Jesus, then why does he think it's John the Baptizer? Yeah, so he knows John the Baptizer. Herod Antipas knows him. Mark chapter 6 talks about that he had this interaction with him before. He actually did not want to put him to death. The reason he ends up having to put him to death is something we'll get to in just a moment in verse 7 that I want to kind of pull out a little bit too. But this just kind of sets up to remind us in Matthew's gospel that John the Baptizer was previously in the story. Now he's been put to death, and now we continue on. Now, this might seem a little strange to just randomly insert the death of John here. Give it a second. There's a huge, huge application waiting for us at the end of this story. All right, can I have somebody read? Let's go verses 6 through 12. 6 through 12.
When Herod's birthday was kept, the daughter of Herodias, the
Thank you, brother. All right, there's two things I want to bring out in this part of the story. First, I absolutely love how Matthew would just take something you think you're just reading. It's just like the part of the the story, and it's like, okay, but you got to really pay attention. Matthew takes themes. We've talked about this. And he will lay down the theme. He'll pick it back up, keep reminding you of it. Here's just a little one that's just kind of thrown in there. Verse 7, what is the issue that causes Herod to have to kill the man he doesn't really want to put to death? What is it? What's happening there? Say again? He swore. Somebody said something? Okay, he's promising with an oath. So in our modern day language, it would be, Tim, I will do this for you. I promise on my grandmother's grave. I promise on my children's, my wife, my home, my whatever. Have we covered that before in Matthew? Has that been anything that's been addressed? I love it. Some of you, yes, some of you no. Go ahead. Oh, the Sermon on the Mount. That's right. What is it that Jesus says? Well, let's hop back and just very quickly look. Matthew chapter 5, verse 34. Matthew 5:34, but I say to you, make no oath at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you make an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Good call, brother. It's saying, listen, you're not in control of this world. You're not the one with the power, with the authority. God is in control. He's the one with the authority. Let your yes be yes. Let your no be no. He got himself in a situation here where the pride got to him, the festival, all the things going on, and he made an oath in front of all these other people that have power like him and people in his kingdom, and his pride said, I can't go back and look weak in front of my subjects. Jesus said, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. It might just be a little thing there, but Matthew is pulling that back up to show this is what happens when you don't listen to Jesus' principles in the Sermon on the Mount. You get yourself into these situations where you do things you don't want to do because of your pride, because of people around you, because of power, whatever it is. That's one little nugget that's in there. But here's something else that I want us to look at in verse 12, the last verse that we read there. It said his disciples came and took the body away and buried it. And then you tell me what happened after they took care of John the Baptizer's body. Who is John the Baptizer to Jesus? Cousins. The forerunner. The one that you remember that Jesus stood up and said, what are you looking for? You've come out here to see some show. You don't like him because he does this. You don't like me because I do this. And he says, I tell you, there's nobody been born that's greater than John. Pause on your Bible caps for a second. And now we're going to get into this application that I believe Matthew is giving us this story for. In the context, he's giving it different than other gospel writers. You tell me how you would respond to life if somebody, be a spouse, a sibling, a cousin, that you thought very highly of and highly respected, and you heard the news. Not only did they die from natural causes, some type of cancer, so on and so forth, they've been brutally murdered and head put on a plate. How do you process that? Anybody? Mm-hmm. Okay. can I ask you, in that situation, was there any piece of that that may have even reminded you of the danger that you were in as well, being in the war? Yeah. Because you kind of can't, right? I understand. I understand. I know it was probably something that you at least had to try to protect yourself from so that you don't go there. So, in this story of having to hear that, I mean, I appreciate your candor, but I also think that's being kind to say it was a little rough that night. That's a lot to process. So, mentally, emotionally, that's rough. Any other thoughts that could go through your head? Yes, sir. Okay, so I'm going to wait. I'm going to piggyback off of those good comments. So we've had a story about seeing a friend pass, how Jesus is reacting to it and wants some time alone. Yes, ma'am? Okay, so I want to bring out that you said we don't know when we might have to, but I do want to say let's go ahead and think on that. Because if we wait until the moment, likely we'll cave to the world and our emotions, and you have to pre-think, how am I going to respond in the evil world? Remember Matthew 13. Don't disconnect just because it was another class. 13, Jesus says there's evil in the world. He even brings it out that in one of his parables where he said, do you want us to go get those tares out? And he says, no. You leave the tares in, because in tearing out the tares, you might rip out one of the good. And so that's an example. There might even be evil among God's people, where they started out good, went down a wrong path. And so let God judge that. You don't go start ripping and causing division. Continue. Yes, sir. Okay, so final question before I get back to the text. Real world, don't give me just the good Bible class answers, as I often will say as I'm teaching in the back to the kiddos. Real world example, something like this has happened to you. What are ways we might be tempted to respond? Yeah. Yep.
What's within their capabilities was to further the work. You know, if you were the king of a neighboring country and that was supposed to you could wipe out the entire nation, but you're responsible for what you're capable of.
Or what you've seen. Maybe the first time you weren't very good at the response, but you've been through it, so maybe you can do a little better. Maybe this is the first time out of your gate, of seeing something like this, and you're not sure how to respond. Was there somebody else? Yes, ma'am. All of this is right where I wanted our hearts to be. We forget Jesus is fully divine, fully God, fully man. You can't take away either one of those. The Bible makes it very clear. In the flesh, tempted as we all are. Yes, he could have said, pulling the plug, done here. I'm going to raise him from the dead. I'm going to defeat Antipas in a physical way, physical manner. Could have been anger, could have been sadness and become small and not been able to respond. He's in the flesh. Okay, don't take that away from him. But instead, he chooses to respond in another way. Listen to this, verse 13. When Jesus heard about John, as Brother Rainwater said, he withdrew from there in a boat to a secluded place by himself. Just pause right there. That was his response because he's human. His response is, I need a moment. That's right. He's going to go pray. He's going to go have that time to commune with his Father. That's the only place he wants to be. He just wants to I love all of you. I'm here for all of you, but I need a moment to myself where I can just process what has just happened. I can deal with my emotions. I can pray to the Father and be with him. And when the people heard of this, they followed him on foot from the cities. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd. Pause. We're not talking like a few people. We're talking about the normal that we've been reading about. Every time he goes to a city, you've had a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend of a family member that's heard, this man can heal you. And of course, you want that. And he's willing. But the temptation for all of us as humans is to shut down. And I'm not just talking like for the moment during processing emotion, but maybe overall, shut it down. But when he saw a large crowd, he felt compassion for them, and he healed their sick. Can you imagine hearing this news, as you said, for a party trick, for entertainment? Hearing your loved one go through this. All you want is to have some time alone. But here's the application that we'll be able to end on tonight. What we're supposed to learn is not just somebody died, somebody bugged Jesus. What we're supposed to pick up as disciples is, in the world there is evil. How are you going to respond? This isn't a call to, no, you can't grieve, no, you can't deal with human. That's not what's going on. Of course we can do that. Of course he wanted to do that. And he'll get to after this feeding story that we have right after. But the thing that I really want to nail down, drill down in our hearts tonight, is that Jesus had so many chances to pull the plug, to walk away, to stop doing. Look at what we've seen so far. He heals people. He's called a false teacher. He talks about Isaiah's scroll in his own synagogue. He's almost thrown off a cliff. He heals people. People say, you're healing by the power of... The Pharisees and scribes follow him every single city and just keep saying, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, don't listen to him, don't listen to him, don't listen to him. And every single time that I just mentioned, if I had the time, the very next verse says, and he healed somebody, and he healed somebody, and he healed somebody. And right here, when all he wants is a moment to himself, here is what we need to see in our Messiah and what we need to put on as a characteristic of our hearts is he saw a large crowd and he felt compassion for them and he healed their sick. The Sermon on the Mount is no longer about a list of laws. It is about a change of heart. First commandment, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. We are not being disciples if we follow laws, but we don't actually act like the person that saw people and just said, I have compassion for you, and entered into their messy situation. To me, this is something that is worth giving some more thought to for the rest of this week until we gather back Sunday morning to worship the Lord and think about, am I changed in here? Do I have compassion for my fellow man that's hurting? Because following Jesus is not just about obedience to Him, it's about obedience to Him and being like Him as God's image bearer. Thank y'all so much. Hope y'all have a great, blessed rest of the week. Can't wait to see everybody Sunday morning to worship the Lord.